Death and Aliens, an in-depth look at horror and sci-fi TV from two cousins who vaguely know what they're doing. I'm MK.
I'm Maka, or Mon, or whatever you want to call me.
All right, so let's dive in to our first episode.
Okay.
So just a little, before we get started, we started today with the very first episode of season 1 of Hemlock Grove. It is entitled Jellyfish in the Sky. It's a Netflix series, so the whole show came out at once. So my date of release for the whole first season is going to be the same, but it came out on April 19th, 2013. It was directed by Eli Roth and written by Brian McGreevy and Lee Shipman. Eli Roth actually is pretty well known for directing some early horror stuff. He was the director of both of the Hostel films, and he directed Cabin Fever. So he was a pretty big name to get for a Netflix show, for directing like a pilot that nobody had ever heard of. But Brian McGreevy and Lee Shipman, this for both of them was the first time they'd ever worked in television. And neither of them have a presence online, so I couldn't really do too much digging into who they are, really, other than Brian McGreevy is the author of the novel that it's based on, and he and Lee Shipman also then produced the show as well as writing the first episode. Mm-hmm. So I have never read the book, so I also have no idea the quality of either of their writing.
Like the adapting of the book to the film.
Right. And because neither of them had worked in television before this, I don't have anything to go off of to say like, oh, well, they were really great writers. So I, again, went into it having no clue what we were in for.
Yeah. The tracking and like the footing that I had online, like we said in the beginning, it was very vague. Like I think the IMDb description of like the show was like a new person moves into town and things start to get weird.
Yeah, so the Netflix like episode summary is: a teenager is murdered in the woods of Hemlock Grove. Evidence points to an animal attack, but suspicions soon fall on Peter, the newly arrived gypsy. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I read that, I was very concerned at the use of the word gypsy. But turns out he actually is Roma, like he's literally a gypsy. It's not a racial issue. Because I was genuinely going to be really turned off if they were just like, oh, using the word gypsy to not mean the Roma people, because like that's not cute.
Yeah, that is not a flex. Don't do that. Nope. Don't.
Don't.
Like you tiptoe some like fine lines there, and you don't want to do that.
No.
But with the beginning of the show, it's definitely, I do have to say, before we completely dive in and dissect with what we learned, I will give it credit because it is the first episode. I think they play on you not knowing what's going on a lot.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of interesting character introductions, and as we get further into the episode, there are some things that I thought were really well done at ways to answer questions before you even really had them. Mm-hmm. So I think what we should do is just take it from the beginning, step by step, what happened, and talk as we get through it. So
we're going to start with the opening scene before the credits, right?
Yes. So it starts with Bill Skarsgård, who at this point we don't know who he is. Obviously, it's the first second. Creepily eating ice cream alone in an ice cream shop.
Yes.
I honestly, it was the way the music was and the way he was sitting. I thought it was one of those like the Netflix picture that comes up to tell you about the show, like at the
Yeah.
opening scene. And I didn't realize it was part of the show until he got up. And I was like, oh no, that was really, we're watching this. Okay, cool.
And the one thing about that scene real quick, with how it's shot, and a lot of the episode does this, and especially in Bill Skarsgård's scenes, I've noticed it's in his scenes almost especially, it almost makes it feel either angelic-like or like he's in a dream. Like the hazing of the camera, the way the light hits, it feels like, but it's only in his scenes. And
that's
because
I didn't notice that.
And it's because that's how the first episode starts. I'm like, oh, like, is this a flashback? Is this a dream that he's having? Just because how hazy everything is. And I feel like there's different. Well, I'll get into it more like when we get to the scenes that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But there's like different like almost like film styles and like different grains that they use in the footage that almost makes it feel like you're watching like 7 different shows in a weird way because of how
like each character is filtered differently.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that's on purpose, as long as they keep that going.
I hope it's on purpose, otherwise they need a new film editor.
Yes.
So he's sitting there eating ice cream, and a girl walks up to the window and knocks on it, to which he then leaves. And we cut to them doing it in a car. And I'm going to be honest, I knew it was Netflix, which means the ratings are different. But like I said, I didn't know anything about this show. So my first note is, 40 seconds in and the first nipple.
Yeah. I'm like, wow, it took 0 time for us to see anyone get active. Because I read the little thing like at the top where it's like, oh, like sex, gore. I'm like, so it'll be like teenagers like frisking around. Nope. Titty. First like minute into the show, just
I literally paused it and timestamped it. It was 40 seconds.
Okay, Netflix, that's an issue.
We don't even know anybody's names yet, and there's already naked.
Exactly. And the only thing that I have to touch on with that scene, no one really seemed into it at all.
No, well, so they're doing it, and then a knife gets pulled out. And I got very concerned. Very concerned. Until and we know now that his name is Roman.
Mm-hmm.
Roman cuts his own finger and rubs the blood on the girl and licks it off.
He was like, I think it was looking off his thumb and he like kept it there.
And if I was trying to, in the most cliche way possible, say, this is our vampire character, that's exactly how I would do it too. I was like, oh, okay, cool, great. The creepy kid who's cutting his fingers is the vampire.
Like, when I was watching that scene, I immediately picked up on the vampire thing, and I'm like, is what he's doing like gonna change her into a vampire? Like, this is some real
question. It wasn't even like, I was like, oh, great. And I also think there are some things that I think are really well played, and there are some things that I think are a little too cliche. Like, and we'll get there farther, but like the character that is like quote unquote, because we don't actually know who anybody is for sure yet, but the character who's quote unquote a werewolf is a like dirty kid who lives in the woods, and the character who's a vampire is like creepy and sexual and cutting his fingers in the first scene. And I was like, could we stereotype these things anymore?
Exactly. The whole premise with like, I had a feeling, because once I found out that Bill Skarsgård was in the show, I'm like, oh, if this has anything to do with a vampire, he's going to be a vampire. There was like no question in my mind that that's what he's going to be casted as.
Well, yeah, I mean, because he's pale and blonde and has eyes just a little bit too big for his face, but in an endearing way. So obviously he's probably going to be the vampire, but like they didn't even like let us linger on the question.
Exactly. It's just like,
yeah.
let me cut my thumb let me rub you with it.
It was so weird. So then he pays her and she leaves.
Yep, and she called him kinky. And I was like, well, yeah, if you're going to cut your finger and rub your blood on me, yeah, you're freaking kinky. Like, that's just a given.
And then we flash to a cheerleader teaching some little girls some cheers, and it's adorable. And Roman is again standing creepily in a corner watching, which I'm going to be honest, I don't think that scene was necessary except to tell us that he knew her. Yeah. But then they did that again later. So like, yeah. I don't know. So this girl, she's cheerleading, then it flashes, then the same girl who was cheerleading is now in class. She's talking to her teacher, her science teacher, who she is having an inappropriate relationship with, both
morally and legally.
Well, yes, there's that, but it's also it's not a male teacher, it's a female teacher, so it's a lesbian relationship, and it's also very illegal. So like it seems like super scandalous, and I did read one spoiler. The teacher will never be in the show again.
Which and that makes no sense, because with what we're about to get into, you would expect it to be a huge pivotal point in this show.
Yeah. So the girl is then on her way to the date with the teacher when her car is brutally attacked and she is seen running through the woods, which I'm going to be honest, the first time I watched it, I was like, why the fuck are you running? Who gets in a car accident and then runs? But then when I watched the episode a second time, I realized that it was very obvious that it wasn't a car that hit her car. I was like, oh, yeah. Okay. No, yeah, I would run too.
And on this scene, when it comes to the visual work,
yeah,
I really, because the thing is that I liked is that it was you knew something was about to happen because of the buildup with the railroad track, the film grain in that, the aesthetic of however they edited the footage for the scene. I loved it. It felt like I was watching a movie from a horror movie from the 1970s with how it was stylistically filmed and whatever filter things that they used over it. And then how it switched to almost like the Blair Witch Project with her running through the woods.
Right.
And found footage, that can be a little jarring, but because some people it can get nauseous after a while, especially if you're watching someone running through the woods.
Right, but luckily it was a short enough scene that it just made you feel as disoriented as she did, because you never saw what attacked her. When the car gets hit, you can't see it, and then it just shows her running, and then so she runs and she hides in this dollhouse, which was a really weird thing to have on a playground, I'm not gonna lie. And then she gets attacked, and you can hear something attacking her, and you can see a lot of blood, and you see what happens to her, but you never see what attacked her. And
in my notes, because obviously later on in the episode they do end up showing what had happened to her, the only thing is because I know that they're adding suspicion, so they don't want to show you what's killing her. It sounded disgusting. Wish I could have seen it. But
it did sound disgusting.
There was a scene where she's holding on to the walls as it's dragging, and her nail
I literally died. I was I grabbed my fingernails. I was like, no.
Because it's one of those common things that can happen to almost anyone with long nails if they hit it the wrong way.
Well, and that's why the thing was, it didn't just bend back; it ripped all the way off her finger, and visually stunning.
Yeah.
When I internalized what that must have felt like, wanted to die a little bit.
And that's what I think is as showing that this girl is getting ripped to shreds.
You can hear the blood and everything, but the only thing they show you is her nail ripping off.
And I guarantee you, and this is how I think about it, if they're gonna focus on something like that, it's because they want to internalize the fear, because it's something that can commonly happen to you any day in your life, because you're not gonna really get eaten alive by something.
Yeah.
So they're gonna give you in a common way, which I love that.
So, but then because she was trying to call her teacher girlfriend, and so as this is all happening, she's on the phone. So the teacher hears the whole attack. And then we will never see the teacher again.
Which makes no sense because the point, I feel like with her death.
That's the thing is like, I like I said, I tried really hard not to find any spoilers, but when I was doing some research, that sentence, like that you never see the teacher again, came up. And I was like, what was the whole point?
Yeah.
The whole point of that setup. And like from a storytelling perspective, there was no reason to introduce the teacher, to introduce the affair, to like, if the teacher is not a character, if that affair is not part of the quote unquote like investigation into what happened to this girl, what was the point? You wasted 5 minutes of my life.
Exactly, because that was a really long introduction for the show.
I thought it was a really long introduction for a character that gets killed before the opening credits. Like, they spent a lot of time on her, and obviously we haven't seen the second episode, so I don't know how the investigation is going to continue, but they spent a lot of time setting up the initial death character, which seemed a little pointless.
Yes. So about the cheerleader's death, the one thing when I was talking about like how we were discussing Roman's like his filter like through the camera, this I don't know if you've ever seen The Babysitter or if anyone has watched The Babysitter. It's that really crappy like campy horror movie that is a Netflix original horror movie. It has Bill Thorne in it, so it's not good. So if you have seen it, I'm sorry. Second of all, if you have seen it, then you'll understand what I'm talking about in the sense that the colors are a lot more vivid in this scene. And I think it's to encapsulate her death because I think this is like when you meet her, everything's very vivid, everything's really colorful.
Yeah.
And she ends up, and her death is vivid and very colorful. And I think it's to encapsulate like true life in a way. And her death.
There's only one other character that I think is given any color, and that's Letha.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just about to say.
Yeah. So and that I have thoughts on that as well. But okay, so girl is dead.
Yeah, she died.
Now after all of that, we are finally at the opening credits. Now, I'm going to talk forever about the opening credits. I literally
on this because I did not even think about this.
I literally watched the opening credits and then paused the show, rewound, rewatched them, and probably took 15 minutes worth of research and notes on just the opening credits. I know, I'm such a nerd. I'm sorry. But I think sometimes you have opening credits, like you have the Stranger Things opening credits where it's literally just like the word Stranger Things.
And the banging.
Well, the dope music, sure, but like it doesn't add anything to the story. And then you have shows like Fringe, which I don't know if you've ever watched Fringe. It's one of my absolute favorite like fantasy, sci-fi, detective-esque type shows. But they have a lot of like really interesting hints in the opening credits about what's going to happen in that episode, and it's different every episode. Like there's alternate universes in that show, and the color of the opening credits tells you which universe you're in for that episode and like stuff like that. So I find like using the opening credits to like start to tell the story to be really interesting, and this did that. So the opening credits are a Rorschach like of blood, which is obviously like the whole idea that it's a psychological thriller. But also interestingly, and I find this to be fascinating, a lot of people don't realize that the Rorschach test, now it's just kind of used in general as like personality disorder type things. But when it was invented, it was only meant to tell if you had schizophrenia or not. Which I think the idea of werewolves and vampires and schizophrenia is a really interesting idea because it's almost as if you are two people, especially in the way that they have set up other things in this show.
Yes.
So then there are 6, throughout this show, there are 6 historical engravings of monsters. And the first one is an infant still stuck inside like the amniotic sac. The second one is a deformed, like awkward conjoined child that has like 6 legs. The third one is a wolf and a boy together. That's probably the most obvious one. The fourth one is a brain that is like too big for the head. The fifth one is this really weird like bear demon thing with wings that like I'm not 100% sure if it's supposed to be a demon or like what, but it's very odd looking. And then there's a fifth one that I think is a griffin. But the thing is, I'm not 100% sure because it only showed the front of the body, and a griffin has like an eagle head and claws, but then a lion for the back half of the body, and I couldn't see the back enough to be sure if it was a griffin or just like an oversized bird. Mm-hmm. Then the last one is the snake that's eating itself, the Ouroboros. So far, by the end of this episode, and I want to talk about it again at the end of the episode because I don't want to spoil things, but so far I know 3.5 of what they mean. So I wanted to, and I took those notes before I finished the episode, so I didn't even know if they were going to mean anything. I was like, oh, maybe these will be hints, but now by the end of the first episode, I already know what 3 of them are, so I'm like, oh, the other 3 might be in there too. Ah! So that is them.
So now, because you probably have more notes as to what the next scene is.
Yes. Well, I mean, the next scene, it opens, it says like a few months ago or
earlier in the summer.
Earlier in the summer. I didn't remember if it said how many months there were earlier in the summer. So it flashes to a mom and son moving in to a house trailer. It's not a house, it's a trailer.
In the middle of the woods.
So, like I said, and they're like really not exactly the most clean or put together people. Like, as if they're part of it is because, okay, that's one of the things that we didn't say earlier when we were talking about Roman is that when he paid the girl, he paid her like $600 or something obnoxious for like a car bone. Mm-hmm. And it is very clearly a juxtaposition of like this filthy rich kid and these people who are definitely not that. They're wearing like kind of like mismatched hand-me-down type clothes. Their hair is not exactly clean, and they're moving into a trailer that is literally just a box in the woods, and it is so covered in leaves that at first you can't even see that there's a trailer there. And it doesn't really give you a lot of info about who they are, except for that it then zooms in on the mailbox, which says romantic, which obviously means that who their family is going to be important at some point. So they're moving into this trailer because this guy named Vince is dead.
Yes.
Who it later turns out that it is
their uncle.
His uncle, but I don't know if that means it's her brother.
Because we don't know her relationship to him. The only info that we really got on Vic was that he, I can't remember the character's name. What's his name?
Peter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Peter is when he explains like why he moved in there is because it's his uncle, but we never hear the mom ever say about her relation.
Right. So the thing is Peter and Vince have the same last name, which would imply that it's related on his dad's side, not his mom's. But up to this point, we have no information about his dad. He lives alone with his mom. So I don't know if it's like his dad was never in the picture, so he has his mom's last name kind of thing, or if it's his dad's brother or what. We don't have a lot of information about their backstory yet. But so it's Peter and his mom, and they're moving into their Uncle Vince's trailer. And they go in to the trailer, and the first thing they do, they like bring all their boxes and they're going to set up to live there. And the first thing the mom does is go to this cabinet and take out like an old music box full of these weird clear vials.
Mm-hmm. And there's like, I think about 4 or 5, because I think the number has something like with how many vials that there are, I think is something that has to deal with certain characters in the story.
Okay, because I didn't count how many there were. Because I just wrote, what are those? Like, why? But I also, this was the first scene that I took note of a religious icon. And then as the episode goes on, religion comes up a lot. Like, and I know that that's not uncommon in the horror genre, that religion is like a juxtaposition to the supernatural, but it's not just a like God thing. It's like religion as a whole, and like different kinds of religion. Because like the first thing that you see is Ganesh, which is a Hindu god. There's a Hindu like shrine inside the trailer. And then obviously like there's a like in the Roma culture, like the gypsy culture, religion is important, and they show them praying and the superstitions that they have with stuff there as well. And then there's a couple things later that I'll talk about that I also noted. So like very early in the episode, they're already focusing on this like world of like world religions. So I find that interesting.
And then after we meet Peter, for the brief moment that we can kind of get a little bit of an idea of where it's going. And then it brings us to Roman and his family. I think that's the next scene, because
the next scene is Peter's dream. Because I have the notes about his dream before the notes about Roman's house. So Peter and his mom, they go, and then he walks off into town and steals a jacket, and that really only just showed us an overview of the town, just to show us how big the town is, I guess. And then he comes back to his house and eats dinner with his mom, and then it flashes to what we find out is a dream. But it flashes to like a black screen with jellyfish floating. And then after the jellyfish, we see the Ouroboros again, the snake eating itself, only instead of an image this time, it's an actual picture, like an actual image of a snake eating its tail. And then the snake turns and goes to bite the camera, and Peter wakes up. Mm-hmm. So obviously the Ouroboros is going to mean more in the show. It's the final image in the credits, and it's like the first vision that we see. Which the Ouroboros is, I did a lot of research on it. A lot.
With, I know like more Greek mythology.
Well, it's actually an image in basically every mythology that exists. It has different, the history of it is like, I literally couldn't take notes. There was so much of it. And it's almost always used in ancient cultures to represent life and death, and like the circle of life and death. But it's also it's also taken on a meaning in the occult as well. Like I know a lot of shows with witches will use it as a symbol of like the balance of life and death when it comes to magic.
Mm-hmm.
So I also noted that as a religious icon as well, because so Peter wakes up from this weird ass dream about jellyfish and snakes, and there is a girl standing there staring at him. Now, she is the only, I think, important, well, we don't know Peter's mom's name, but it's easy to just call her Peter's mom. Whereas this girl, she's the only important character that we have literally no idea what her name is.
Yeah, there's literally nothing the whole time of their conversation in the scene. They never exchange names, but she knows his last name, and she knows more about him than he does about her.
Right.
Which is kind of shocking for a character, though.
She claims that it's because she's a novelist and she's going to be writing a story, and she like looks at him as inspiration because he's weird and different. But I think there might be more to it than that, because she's just freaking weird.
Yeah, like and also was a thing when they were first moving into their trailer, she was just standing in the woods watching them.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
She was just holding her book like this, and just standing like behind a tree. Like that's like this. She's
so odd. And then this was the first time that I had to pause it to look up what something meant, only to find out that, because a lot of times when they would use a word or a phrase that I thought had meaning or meant something, I would look it up. And he is talking about how he's only half Roma, because his grandpa married someone in America who was not part of the gypsy culture. And she was like, and he was saying a bunch of stuff, and he was using a lot of like language that is very distinct to their culture. And she says, what does that even mean? And he said, it means the romantics are meant to forever ride the earth on two horses with only one ass. And I was like, oh, maybe that's like foreshadowing for something in the show. So I looked it up. And apparently it is an idiom in Russian that when translated to English no longer means anything. So I don't know if it's going to matter in the future or if it's just weird.
Could be just weird. Because either the writers did take their time and made it mean something, or the writers took the no-nonsense translation and said, you know what, we're going to make it mean something.
Well, but it's also interesting because I don't, like I said, Brian McGreevy is not on the internet really. I wasn't able to find out anything about him, but it is very interesting how detailed and accurate a lot of the depiction of the Roma culture is. And because of the nature of where they're from, it may just be that it was really just him saying something that in English no longer means anything, but that's okay because it means something to him.
Yes. And
so
that's fair enough.
I won't care either way. I just found it interesting that it literally means nothing. And then we have our next religious symbol, and that is that there is a pentacle carved into a tree. And it is a pentacle, not a pentagram. It is not.
And that made me extremely happy that because she was like, oh, why do you have a pentagram carved into your tree? And he's like, it's not a pentagram. And he explained it to her. He didn't call it a pentacle, but the pentacle is when the star's facing upwards, the pentagram is when the star is facing.
And he didn't get into the whole thing, but he did talk about the 5 points and how the one pointing up represents the soul.
And because in a pentacle, the 4 points on the side represent earth, wind, fire, and water.
Yeah, and he said it was about the elements.
Yes, and that is actually true as someone who like studies that stuff. That was like actually really nice, because there's one thing that irritates me about a lot of the horror movie subgenre when it comes to like occults, witches, and things like that. The pentagram is associated with them, but it's not the pentagram, it's a pentacle. Yeah. And unless it's of course for other purposes, and it made me happy that the writers made the recognition to clarify that no, this isn't what you.
Right. And it's also interesting because a lot of times when they use a pentagram and have it to do with witchcraft, it's because they're immediately deeming witchcraft as evil, and so they're associating it with the pentagram, which is mostly associated with the devil. And that makes sense that if the pentacle represents the soul pointing upward, a pentagram would be reversed and the soul pointing downward. And it makes sense, but to have them clarify and separate and then take a non-aggressive stance toward witchcraft was a nice, refreshing way of putting it. And that's why I put it in the same category as the Ouroboros and the Ganesh statue, because it's just incorporating another religion into it. Yeah.
And the one note that I written, because he was also drinking, and we're gonna call her.
I did not realize how young any of these characters were until about 15-20 minutes into the episode, because none of them are acting like children.
No, they're all like 17.
Yeah.
And they're all like drinking, partying, and buying prostitutes. I'm like, bro, what town is this? Is this Las Vegas? Because I swear to God.
No, it's Hemlock Grove, Pennsylvania, which is somewhere between Erie and Pittsburgh. And as someone who has driven the stretch of road between Erie and Pittsburgh many times, I don't know how many kids in that area are really just snorting coke off a mirror and paying for prostitutes. But honestly, probably more than I would think, because I am old.
Yeah, probably.
And out of touch with culture.
But like, if you're snorting cocaine off a mirror and you in a bat, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. But
I have absolutely no notes on that scene. None.
I had one, because I know exactly why that scene was put in there, and I shall discuss. I will discuss that scene, because quite honestly, one of the most beautifully cinematic scenes I think I've seen in the whole show so far, for obvious reasons. But
I do have one other note about the scene before we move on to the meat of why that scene was important. I have one other note. Peter says that his Uncle Vince died of alcohol poisoning, and I don't believe that. I didn't make this note the first time through, but the second time watching it, I was like, I don't think that's how he died.
I think that there is, because as we'll learn through, especially in this episode, there are two families that don't like each other. And I think that's something to do with his uncle's.
And I think that's why I didn't catch it on the first time through, because at the first time through, at this point, you don't know anything about either family yet. And so on my second watch, I was like, I don't believe that.
I mean, like, I guess, like, to an outsider point of view, because you see all the empty beer bottles laying around.
Yeah.
Like, it's
and when they first even got to the thing, to the trailer, Peter's mom says something about Vince being sober, and Peter seems surprised that Vince was ever sober. So we do know that he drank a lot, but something about the way he said it just made me feel like there was more to the story.
Yeah. And the thing is that, because as he's discussing with this girl, which we're gonna call her Hemingway, because he ends up calling her that, because they never finds out her name in the first episode. And it'll just be easier so that you at least know who this girl is and you can put a name to it. The girl in the woods, Hemingway, they have an interesting back and forth as to where they're new to each other, but it's almost like they're comfortable with one another. And it was really strange. Like, they were able to be like comfortably mean to each other, but not take offense to it in every aspect. Like, there was one point where she got offended.
Well, I was gonna say, I agree that it felt a little comfortable, but to me, it didn't feel like they were both comfortable. It felt very much like she was on the attack, and he was so used to being attacked that he just didn't care.
Yeah. Because it was just like,
he kind of seems like a little bit of a snarky a-hole. So, like, it didn't matter what she said to him, he was always going to have a comeback. And at first she found it interesting, and then she found it offensive.
Yes.
So after the whole discussion about the pentacle, her next question, first she's asking him about like pentagrams and devil worship and swimming naked in a pond. And then she immediately jumps to, are you a werewolf? That was a leap to make.
Because I wouldn't really associate, pentagrams, swimming in ponds, werewolf.
Right. And her reasoning is also very interesting because she said that it's because his two index and middle finger are the same length. Now, that's untrue. The myth that is most often represented as being a werewolf is if your index finger is longer than your middle finger. Them being the same length is not that rare of an occurrence.
Yeah.
And if every man who had his front two fingers the same length was a werewolf, there would be a lot more werewolves in the world.
Yeah. And then one of my favorite things that because he asked her, like, well, where'd you hear that from? She said, TV mostly. And he's like, what, are you going to go find a sparkling vampire for me to have an uncomfortable three-way with?
That was so funny. Oh, he said we know where your literary inspirations are. And I was like, that is the meanest thing you could ever say to someone who's trying to write a book.
Say they compared it to Stephanie Meyer. Like, listen, I love Twilight, but like, is it good? No, but this is not what this is about.
But
it's
also like 2013 was probably like the height of the. Yeah, really, it was the height of the. It was tapering off. It was probably tapering off. But you think about the show came out in 2013. And in 2013, we had Twilight, we had Vampire Diaries, we had True Blood, we had Teen Wolf. Like, werewolves and vampires were like the only thing on TV. So, like, if you're getting your proof of what a person could be a werewolf from TV in 2013,
there's not a lot of good evidence there to support your claims.
and your hopes of becoming a very, very well-respected author are negligible at best.
Yeah.
So they get into a little tiff. And eventually he doesn't say it, but he basically tells her to like shove off and he goes back inside.
Mm-hmm.
Next scene, we cut to Monsieur Roman in bed.
Yeah, an immaculate scene. And the scene starts... Give me that look, Mary Kate.
Listen, him being pretty doesn't make it a good scene.
Well, yeah, I know, but visually it's stunning for my eyes. So the thing is, like, it starts off with Roman passed out in bed, and this is when we realize, oh, this kid's 17.
Yeah.
And his mom comes in, and mind you, I thought she had an accent as a joke to begin with to wake him up, because then she kind of slipped into an American accent like in her second line, and then she just kind of stuck with the accent the rest of the episode.
Yeah, so okay, this Roman's mother, I don't remember her name. Did we learn her name? Julia?
Yes.
Somehow
we find that out
in the flashback. Okay. I was like, somehow I totally missed that. She's played by Famke Janssen, who is an absolutely phenomenal actress. And she is Dutch. So she does have an accent, but I've seen her in plenty of things where she didn't have an accent. So I know she has the ability to have an American accent. But I don't know if her accent was like a geographical accent or a financial accent. Because you know how sometimes people who are really rich have an accent that like doesn't exist? Like the fact that Madonna sounds British even though she's most definitely not.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if she comes from somewhere or she just is putting on airs.
And I feel like the more putting on airs thing could be more of the case, because Peter's and Roman's lives are night and day. Like to the extreme where like one's getting a tailor-made suit and one's stealing clothes from a store where they have a tool in their drawer that gets off security tags. Like two completely lifestyles in the same town, which is I think is a really cool contrast between two extremely probably different characters.
And literally my note about the scene in Roman's bedroom is how grossly rich do you have to be?
Yes.
And then I also wrote, also Roman's mom is gross.
Yeah. I was getting a lot of like Norman Bates type of vibes going on in that room.
Right. She just was very affectionate in a way that made me slightly uncomfortable, to say the least.
And there's one other scene, and I'll talk about it when we get there, that made me feel as equally as uncomfortable between the two of them.
Oh, I think I know exactly which scene you're talking about because I felt real weird. But I also don't know if it's her or if it's him. Because because I get some weird vibes with him and his cousin too.
When I was watching that scene, I didn't think she was his cousin.
So weird. Okay.
And I was like, wait, whoa, no. So if this is a bloodline type of crap, stop it.
Right? So basically he's got to get this tailor-made suit, but he told his mom that he would rather hang out with his cousin than her, and his mom, I don't know if she was trying to like win him over or if she like genuinely wanted him to hang out with his cousin or what, but she uses their disgusting amount of money to rent out an entire theme park for just him and his cousin.
And she also rents out Pennsylvania.
No.
Scene too.
Pennsylvania is
I thought you... listen, Mary Kate, I watched it for the second time, the second time through at 2 a.m. and I heard Pennsylvania twice. So that's
they live in the state of Pennsylvania, and there is a theme park called Pennsylmania.
That's why I was so confused. Like, you need to tell me this bitch bought the state.
No, just the amusement park.
Thank you, because now that scene makes a lot more sense to me because I kept hearing Pennsylvania. So I'm like, why are they at the park all alone and these security guards like have zero souls? Like they look like they're dead inside.
Yeah. So then we flash to another house. And at this point we don't know who these people are, but it is a husband and wife and their child. And this is the first couple that we've seen in the movie. Like this is the first family that we've seen in the movie that has two parents.
Yes.
Movie, TV show, whatever. So it turns out that this is Roman's Uncle Norman, who he was talking about earlier in the episode, who is kind of the patriarch of the Godfrey family. So he is like the head of all of this, this money. And his daughter, Letha, who, again, religious reference, is reading a book called A Dictionary of Angels, which her father is very perplexed by.
He's like, why are you what are you reading? And then she just completely...
Yeah, because Roman calls her and tells her that the two of them are going to Pennsylvania. Just the two of them. So cut to them on the Ferris wheel or merry-go-round. And
which again, the cinematic thing makes it look like you are watching a dream sequence.
Yeah, it was that time I did notice how blurry, like the blurry filter and everything. And it was like, but it was like a montage of them on the carousel and then playing games and everything. And
where you would see your boyfriend, not your god dang darn dash.
Yeah, it was definitely a little, and I didn't put it together. Like the first time I watched it, I didn't realize that Norman said Letha's name. So I didn't know who this girl was. And I was like, oh, that's weird if he has a girlfriend because he was just boning a prostitute in a car. but not his girlfriend.
No,
No.
because then there's the scene at the end when they're gonna go on the big roller coaster, and they're getting this like real uncomfortable, like you could cut the sexual tension with a knife between these two.
Yeah, but it was also, I really liked that moment because it was also very clear that they, despite the fact that they both have a F ton of money, they're very different people.
Yeah.
And like one of my favorite moments in the whole episode was Letha's looking around at all of these people who are still forced to work at this empty amusement park that is only for the two of them. And she says, "What do you think they think of us?" And he says, "Who?" She said, "Exactly." And that was so telling of the fact that she doesn't take her money for granted, or and she cares about people around her, whereas Roman is very much like
Making it rain.
yeah.
And the one thing that I have that I think is a theory with the film on Roman's life, because even the film on Peter's life is complete, like his is more like I feel like there's like more of a sepia undertone in a lot of Peter's scenes.
But it's also it's also a much crisper film. Like it's very, there's not a lot of grain, there's not a lot of haze. It's just very accurate.
And I feel like with Romans, I feel like they're giving you a sense of this lavish life where it's like for most people it's like you're living in a dream like state. And I feel like because Roman's head's very in the clouds, because his life has been just given to him, it's almost like a dream in a way. Where I think he's aware that his life is what people would dream it to be. His head's just very in the clouds, and he's almost oblivious to what probably his path is doing to other people. And I feel like that's going to be very telling later on.
Yeah.
In the show.
But I also think it's very telling of, and this will make more sense when we get to the next two scenes from now, but I think it's also very telling of the fact that he doesn't know what's really going on, whereas Peter does.
Yes.
And I think that is a very clear distinction, even visually. So then they leave the amusement park, and we go to the first day of school. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. The first day of school, and Peter sees Roman for the first time. This is the first time they see each other. And it is very clear that this is where the dichotomy of the show is going to be. They don't interact, they just see each other, but the way the camera moves past them, it's very much like I know something you don't know.
Yeah.
And then Peter walks up to Hemingway, and he calls her that. That's when he calls her that. He says, "Hey, Hemingway." And she says, "Don't call me that," and gets real awkward, and then just continues to stand there and stare at him. And that was when I was like, this girl's insane. I don't think I like her.
I don't think I like her, but here's the thing. I think Peter has a weird sense for her, that he cares for her, but is afraid to because of her judging and telling ways, because of what she does to him.
I don't know. I mean, part of it is that once I realized that they were all still in high school, I kind of started looking at them as asexual humans. Obviously, they're not. Like, we watched them do sexual things, but like, I don't think of children in that way. And so like, I don't, which of course they're fictional characters and the story is based in the perspective of two 17-year-old boys. So I'm sure there's going to be sexual attraction that I'm going to have to talk about, even though it makes me uncomfortable. But I don't know. There's some kind of like magnetic thing between them, but I don't know if it's care or desire or hate or like we don't understand her enough to know why.
But there's definitely some form
there's
of
something like
pull.
it's not just the she's the only person he knows kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then we find out that she has been, and we don't find this out till later, but it's important here because you see her standing with all of her friends being weird and awkward. You find out that she's been telling everyone that he's a werewolf.
And a gypsy.
And well, but the thing is, he is a gypsy.
Yes. But
And
everyone
also potentially yes to the other one too.
mm-hmm.
But like, if you met some dude in the forest and like accused him of being a werewolf, why would you then go and tell everyone you know that some weird werewolf moved in?
And this is the thing where I took a note down. I'm like, does everyone know or is aware of these two families or these legends that to be true? Because it's like everyone believes what she's saying with zero doubts.
But the thing is, I don't think everyone knows about. I think honestly, I think it's just that like that's basically the girls' way of being mean girls. Like I don't know if it is that they actually think he's a werewolf or if they're just like haha, you new kid.
Yeah, because I will because the only reason why I wrote it down towards near the end of the episode, and it's when you can cut this part out like in editing and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's at with the cops because as just in romantics like.
The other thing is the cops are adults, and because Vince didn't have any other family, I don't know how many teenagers would be aware of it. If Vince had a kid and there was some kind of feud before Peter got there, I could see that. Unless this particular girl happens to be the daughter of the cop that Hemingway was talking about.
Yeah.
So, because we didn't talk about this. In the scene where she's calling him a werewolf, a cop drives by and he gets uncomfortable. That's when he goes inside, is when he sees the cop. And
that's like, I've had enough.
He says that he's a good guy and he's the sheriff. His name is Tom, and he has a daughter at the school as well.
Mm-hmm.
But so we're at school. And then the strangest character on the show,
who I love her already,
enters the hallway.
Shelley.
At this point, we don't know her name is Shelley, but honestly, it's kind of hysterical that her name is Shelley because Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, and this girl is literally slobbering down the hallway like Frankenstein's monster.
Like her hands are wrapped.
Her hands are wrapped in as if they're broken, or burned. Yeah. She isn't picking up her feet when she walks. Her head is down, so you can't see her face. And she's about 6'20".
I literally, in my notes, part of my French, in my notes, I literally wrote down big bitch because I didn't know what her name was.
But she's massive. And
literally huge.
And so then Peter is kind of uncomfortably following her, trying to figure out what is going on with this crazy gigantic woman. And then Roman walks up and says, "Hey sis," and puts his arm around her. So now we know Shelley, the gigantic Frankenstein monster, is Roman's sister.
Yep.
That is all we see of school.
Yes, that's. Oh, then there's also a scene where Peter sees Roman buying Coke, and
yeah, about that.
Spends a lot of money on it. He's like, "Thanks, man." Fist bumps the dude, and they walk off like it's nothing. I forget that we're in modern day sometimes because of how they act and interact with people. I'm like, that doesn't seem like modern. The only modern day scene was the cheerleader. It just felt like it all feels kind of like you're dressed modernly, the technology is modern, but you all talk like it's 1960. I just felt like we were in a different time era with how they were interacting with each other.
Yeah. So No, it was weird. And also because of the tone of the camera, the way it's lit and the costuming, even the fact that the clothes are modern, but they're not like New York City modern. It's like what a normal small town in the middle of nowhere would
Oh, wait.
consider like normal clothes. So like it has this almost out of place vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the dresses that the girls are wearing are very like kind of dowdy patterns.
Hmm.
So then we leave school and it cuts to Peter's house first. And it's Peter at the dinner table with his mom talking about the first day of school. And she's asking him about school. And he says that there is an au pair there who he doesn't think knows he's an au pair. Again, paused to Google. Because obviously I assumed it had something to do with like vampires, but I looked it up and it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. So an au pair is based on like Slavic and Turkish mythology, and it's basically got some vampire vibes, but also a little bit of like almost zombie vibes. So basically what happens with an au pair is that they are someone who has died and then their soul has gone back into their body, and in order to keep their body animated, like reanimated, they have to feed off of other people's souls, which is often done in the form of drinking blood. Because you would think if somebody was a vampire, they would be aware that they were a vampire, just based on the normal mythology of how vampires are created. But this myth seems to have more ability for someone to age and still be like these myths, like it would be someone who they still have the capability of aging and growing and getting hurt. They just also need blood to live.
It's like they're still human, but instead of eating human food and drinking water to survive,
it's because their body's not dead, but their soul is.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Strange concept.
Yeah. But I kind of dig it because it's different. It's the first time that I felt like, oh, this isn't your classic, exactly how you would picture it, vampire werewolf feud story.
Yeah.
Then we immediately flip to the other family's dinner table, which is, again, they do that really stark contrast of color changing, like setting being very different, like spacing, the size. It just was like very, very obviously like we are the opposite side of the world from you.
And the fact of the dynamic between the two lives is with Peter and his mother. They're very close.
They're very close. He's opening up information to her. Oh, I forgot. But he says who the kid is. Mm-hmm. He tells his mom about the au pair, about Roman, and then he starts talking about Shelley, and he says that they are the Godfreys. And his mom says, "That's my problem. Stay away from them."
Yeah. And at the dinner table at Roman's house, they're very quiet, and Julia, which is Roman's mother, she's like, well, does any other exciting events happen your day?
Because you gotta talk to me.
And so then Roman, which I feel like he has to be aware of something, because he brings up Peter and him being a romantic to her, and she gets pissed.
Romantic, yeah. I don't know if he knows something or if it's just that their town is so small and so boring that a new kid is literally the only thing he can talk about.
Yeah.
Because he's obviously not going to be talking to his mom about sex and drugs.
Yeah. Like, I bought a thing of Coke off my friend, had sex with a prostitute. What else did I do?
Right.
Yeah. That's my Friday day.
So his only really, like, the only thing that is different in the town, like the only thing that he can talk about is that there's this new kid. And the way he says it, like, oh, like, he's this guy, he's that old guy who lived in the trailer's nephew, like, this one girl keeps telling everybody he's a vamp or like a werewolf. I don't think he knows.
I think he has suspicion, but I don't think he has confirmation.
Yeah. The thing is, I thought he was more clueless than I think he is based on the final scene of the episode.
Yes.
So yes. That's the one thing. I have to say, so far I don't hate the show, but it's very all over the place. Like, it's a lot of throwing things at the wall and hoping they stick. And I'm hoping that that's just because they're trying to introduce so many characters at once and that the next episode will be a little smoother. But I can't guarantee that that's what's going to happen, so I am a little nervous.
Yeah, that's where I feel like that's where I feel like a lot of their issues are going to lie, because considering that we know the reviews, I feel like it's probably going to stay a little sporadic. And that's the one thing that's one issue I had, because I had to rewind certain scenes, because the scene that's coming up after we feel out the families a little bit, like we end up seeing Shelly like go upstairs in a literal cage, like she gets in an elevator.
It had like 1940s horror vibes so hard.
And this is where we have a reveal, which is something that I was so excited to talk about.
I knew you would be.
And because I was like, wow, first episode and something this fucking cool gets shown. Like, yeah, I was really happy.
I think I know what you're going to say. And I actually disagree, because I think it was actually my favorite transition in the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
Because, okay, so Shelly gets, after the dinner table, Shelly gets in her creepy Dr. Frankenstein 1940s horror movie elevator to go up to her room. And she takes off her hair, that is in fact a wig. You get the reveal of her face.
And her face, the one side looks like a completely like normal girl's face, and that's normally the only side that people at school see. And the only side that she even shows her family, which we're gonna learn we learn a little bit later in the episode in the reveal, and probably even more in depth later in the season. That
I think that she hides it because she thinks it makes them uncomfortable, not because they don't know about it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I feel like because of the flashback that we got, and I feel like it's going to come more into play as she's growing up, and we're going to probably go back and forth with the past and present to learn more about these characters.
Yeah.
With her head, she has no hair. Her half of her face is like completely like normal, and the next half of her face, it's like bulbous, and her one eye's up here and the other one's almost reptilian like. Mm-hmm. In a way, like iris is so huge, and the way that it blinks compared to her normal eye, completely different. Like, I know that it's not all prosthetic. I'm pretty sure for the whole head piece they probably had just a single like black, like a big black glass piece in there and added the effects later. And she has veins that run through her head that glow.
No, I don't know how much of it is CG and how much of it is prosthetic, because it moved in a way that CG has trouble moving.
And that's why I feel like the base of it, like the actual, like the way her head is shaped, is a prosthetic. I feel like the way that they made the eye move in a way, it could have been post edit. But I have a feeling the base effect is all 100% prosthetic.
There probably is some kind of orb in the mask for spacing in the prosthetic, and then they probably add like color and dimension to it.
Yeah,
digitally.
And the blue light that's through her veins to enhance them. I think that they're painted there, but they have to enhance it in.
The light they definitely have to enhance. But I have to say, so I saw this moment. She takes her face off. She does the reveal. My first thought was, Monica's going to love this. My second thought was, what the hell happened? And then it immediately goes to a flashback. And I loved that because it was like as soon as I had the question, they were there to answer it for me.
Yes.
So the flashback is 13 years earlier. So now we know that Shelly's 15.
Mm-hmm.
So she's 2 years younger than Roman. He's 17, she's 15, because in the flashback, it's of their dad. And he says that he's had this monster living in his house for 2 years. So the flashback is basically the dad, whose name is JR. And JR is talking to his brother Norman, and they are fighting. And JR believes that his wife is not human. He believes that she's some kind of weird demon because their child was born with a glowing blue light in their head.
And he said a notable thing about Shelly, and he says a statement which is like one of those words like, whoa, holy crap. He literally says, like, don't call that abortion.
I literally wrote that. He said, don't call that abortion by my daughter's name. And I wrote that down, and I was like, that is some strong language.
And I feel like it's because the reason why he's so confused as to why she's there, and that's why I think he has the suspicions even more so, is because I feel like they tried to get rid of it, but it didn't die.
I mean, yeah, I can see that, but I also think that, like, if you're, first of all, Julia does not seem like a very loving, happy woman. And also we find out that she's having an affair with Norman, and JR knows. So, like, she's not very nice.
Yeah.
She's very mysterious. She's sleeping with his brother. And then she gives birth to this thing that is clearly not entirely human. That's a lot to take on, I think. And I obviously was very upset with the way he talked about it, especially, like, now that we've seen Shelly as an adult, like, not an adult, as a 15-year-old, and, like, she's clearly a very, like, hurt person. But then in the flashback, they show her in her crib. Like, they don't show her, but they show the crib with just this glowing blue light. And he says she knows what we're feeling because of the light. And, like, there's clearly something more to what is going on with her. And he's very, very uncomfortable with it.
And when he's explaining Shelly to Norman when they're outside of his business in, like, the pouring rain, he's like, she's not even 2 years old and she weighs 40 pounds. And then he says, she knows what you're thinking from the other side of the room. That's why you can't hide anything from you. And he says that he needs help from his brother to destroy her.
Yeah.
And he's like, we're not destroying anything.
Right.
And because when the flashback, before we get to meet, or before we see Shelly's crib in the blue light, he walks upstairs, he gets a gun out of his bedroom and walks upstairs, and we're all under the impression that he's going to try and kill her, and that's why her face is deformed, because it might not have worked. But
I'm not sure about that. I think it may have been deformed before. But before we go back to him in the house, there's one thing that is important in the scene with him and his brother that didn't seem important at first, but there is a third business partner. And this is the first time he's ever mentioned. His name is Dr. Price. He's a scientist. And when Norman shows up, he says, Price told me you were here. And so clearly, whoever this guy, who we do eventually meet in the episode, clearly he knows more than they want someone outside of the family to know.
Yeah. And so when, like I said, when they're in the house, like, I know he doesn't end up trying or attempting to kill Shelly because of what unfolds in this scene. He walks up there with the gun. It looks like he's contemplating, but then the light glows and he changes, and then he walks away. Which I don't know if the glow has something that alters a person's perspective or something like that.
I don't know.
And then he goes into Roman's room and he kisses his forehead and says, I'm sorry, Roman. And then he leaves and then goes into the living room, standing behind Julia on the couch. with the gun next to him, and you were sitting there thinking like, well, if he wants to kill her so badly, why doesn't he just shoot her in the head now? Because she might not even know, nor she might not care because she probably might not even die.
Right.
And the exchange that they have in he confronts her on knowing that she's different, that there's something different about her, and then like things get heated, riled up, and he's like,
before you get to that, there's something that's super, super, super important in what she says in that fight. Because so he's asking like, what are you? And she like lists all these adjectives about how unhappy she is. And he's like, no, what are you? And she doesn't say anything. And he says, what about our son? And she says, he was born in the cull. He will always be mine. Now, being born in the cull means that when a baby is born, their head is still fully trapped inside the amniotic sac. They're born still attached to the mom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why she's saying that means he will always be hers. That's also the first picture in the opening credits. So that's super important. I don't know what that means for how he is who he is or whatever, but that when she said that, I was like, what does that mean? So I looked it up, and when I saw what it meant, I was like, oh my God, that's the first picture.
Yeah.
So,
and after she says that he will always be mine, there's like an odd silence. She's looking at him, and then the thunder happens, and it pans to the outside the house, and you hear a gunshot go off.
Yes. Now, we don't know if she killed him or he killed himself, but then he's just laying there dead, and she's casually standing looking out the window until Roman walks in and sees him on the floor and starts to cry, and she picks him up and she says, oh, Roman, like, don't be afraid, you'll always be stronger than he is, which means that even if he wasn't some kind of supernatural creature, of course this kid is messed up. At 4 years old, he saw his dad dead on the floor and his mom didn't care.
Exactly. And that's where the flashback ended, was after her talking and saying that you're always going to be stronger.
Yeah.
Now, the next scene is Yes, the next scene is the woman going for a jog.
Oh, yes.
And she's running through the playground, and she looks over, and we finally get to see the aftermath of what this thing did to that cheerleader, which her name, I can't remember her name was.
I don't remember her. Bridget, maybe?
No, her last name it was like Bluebell.
Her last name was Bluebell.
Bluebell.
Yeah.
I remember her first name.
Me either.
It might
for
have.
some reason, I think it was a double B name, but I also, like I said, they spent too much time introducing her just for her to be dead, and then for them to never talk about her again. So, like, I don't know.
And so, we finally see what happens to her, and then next thing we know, like, the police are there, and they're taping off the surrounding area, and we get to see the guts. I literally wrote down bloody guts with an exclamation point. So I was like, I was so hoping we were going to see what it did to her without having what sounded like a gross, disgusting kill happening off screen. To see.
I do appreciate that they showed them separately, because like I'm not a big gore person. Like I'm not squeamish when it comes to like medical stuff, but like I would rather not watch someone's intestines get ripped out of their stomach.
I've watched too much Saw to even care anymore. I've watched too much like gory horror. I'm like, okay, like I know it's not real. It's all fake. Like it's gross. Like it did a great job, but like
I don't know. Like
the nail being bent off made me more uncomfortable than seeing her guts being splayed all over the place.
See, yes, but if they had showed something ripping them out, I don't know that would have been true.
I know it still would have been true. At least for me. I was just like, oh, cool, look at that. I heard tum-tums getting cool. I was like, all right. If you've seen The Thing, like, John Carpenter's The Thing, and you've seen literally things busting out of body or Alien, you're like, okay, it's just another.
I literally get so uncomfortable every time I watch that scene from Alien. Like I know, and I'm prepared, and I've seen it so many times. But also, fun fact that has nothing to do with our show, no one on set knew what was going to happen. When they filmed that scene from Alien, literally they were not told what was going to happen. The only person who knew was John Hurt because he was underneath it. Like, he was the one who came out of his stomach. That, like, shock and disgust on, like, Sigourney Weaver and all them faces was literally because they didn't know. They just knew that a thing was going to come out of his stomach. They didn't know what it was going to look like. They didn't know how it was going to come out. No, that is all genuine horror on their faces.
I love when directors do that type of stuff. I'm like, yes, scare your actors.
As an actor, it makes me so uncomfortable. As an actor, it makes me so uncomfortable. If I was on stage and something popped out like that and I was not aware that that was going to happen, I would literally vomit.
See, we both love horror, but there's two different types of people that love the horror.
I like being scared. I don't like being afraid that my body is going to fall apart.
Okay, so back to finding her body. They end up taping everything off, and as we know, because they give you a lot of background noise clues. Because I watch it with subtitles on for this reason.
I don't watch anything without subtitles. Okay.
And there was, when you were meeting Peter, and with the cheerleader's death, her death is by train tracks, clearly. Yeah. And in Peter's household, there's a caption that says you can hear, like, a train whistle being blown.
Right, like he's close enough to the tracks that you can hear the train from his house.
So it gives you, like, subtle clues that, like, oh, he lives by the train tracks.
Yeah.
So where it would believe you to think that, oh, he's the one that did this to her. Because of the fact that she runs through the woods and everything, to give you that first suspicion. Him, obviously, I honestly don't think it was him.
See, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
I think there's some third party involved in it, and I'll explain as to why later. But, like, when we get to the end, we can talk about, like, our theories and stuff is where it's gonna go.
No, and when we get to the moment where I did think it was him, I will tell you.
Okay.
Yeah.
They see him walking through the by where the playground is, and the cops pull him to talk to him and take a statement. And that's where we discover that the one cop knows of the Romantics, and clearly that name has some impact on the town. Like, there's something about the Romantics that people know about here.
Wait,
and
what are you saying?
That when he's
walking, the name, what are you saying?
I said romantic because that's how it sounds like.
Oh, it's romantic.
Romantic?
Yeah, that's why I was like, wait, what are you saying?
Because every time I heard it like romantic, and then, because looking at the spelling doesn't help me clarify it in any way either.
No, it's romantic.
Thank you. Okay, so we're not and not correct ourselves. So the romantic, that name clearly has a meaning in this town.
Yeah.
And with the suspicion that the cop had, and he called him a dirty gypsy. He called him that in that scene.
Right.
And whether he uses it as a derogatory term, like a racial term, or knowing the true fact that he is a legit gypsy.
A little bit of both. I think it's definitely, like, I think that the writers are using it in the sense that they're actually of Roma heritage, but I think the other characters are most definitely using it in a slurred way.
Yes. And so after that, he's like, well, have the kid. And he was like, what are you doing over here? And he's like, I live over there. And he was always polite. He was very polite. He wasn't, like, rude or anything. Didn't have attitude. And he was like, explaining like how he lives and where he goes to school. And he's like, did you hear anything happen last night? And he's like, no, I didn't hear anything. And he was like, okay, we'll get this kid's statement and make sure he gets to school. And then Peter ends up getting driven to school by the police officer.
Right.
And then that's where that scene ends. I'm not sure. I can't remember what the next scene was. It's the cop and oh wait, no. I think we forgot a scene.
Did we?
Yes, it's the scene after it's shortly after the amusement park, and it was after the flashback. Actually, it might be this scene right after this, because Nathan goes over to Nolan. I'm trying to remember the JR's brother's name.
Norman,
thank you. So it's Norman. He goes over to, this is the bathtub scene.
Yeah, so this was right after the flashback.
Yeah, so we kind of jump shipped onto the finding the dead body.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just rearrange it in editing. But coffee's going well. So after the flashback, come in my mouth. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea when I'm in the middle of talking. JR's brother, Norman, right?
Yeah.
Norman goes and meets with Julia at her house. Mind you, one of my favorite scenes, which we're not really going to talk about because there's nothing really to talk about except Bill Skarsgård sitting in a bubble bath with a mirror, snorting coke, and it just looking really pretty.
Yeah.
I condone the coke snorting, but I condone looking at Bill Skarsgård in a bubble bath. I'm okay with that.
I mean, I'm not anti Bill Skarsgård in a bubble bath. I just don't see what the point was.
My thing is because it leads to him looking out the window and looking at Norman. I feel like there's some weird tension between him and Norman.
But there's not. I think, because remember in the beginning, he's talking to his mom about something that his Uncle Norman said, and she was like, well, if Uncle Norman gave you a communist manifesto, would you start asking me to make recipes with borscht? I think that because his dad died when he was so young, he looks to Norman as a father figure. I think he's more uncomfortable with his mom than he is with Norman.
Yeah, that I can see. Because the only thing that like tipped me off about them, like, why does he look so like uncomfortable at looking at him out the window? Like, it looked like he was concerned that he was coming over to the house, and I don't understand why, unless it was for more of Norman's sanctity than.
Or unless he knew that his mom was in trouble for renting out all of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And then, so Julia and Norman have a discussion in what looks like a greenhouse.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what their business is at this point. We have zero clue what they do, what they work with.
Right. They literally, even in that scene, he was like, what do you think this business is? And she said, our business is to make money. So, like, we have no idea what they do.
Yeah.
We know that they're filthy rich. And that everybody knows they're filthy rich, and that they care about making more money.
Exactly. And then there's obviously some uncomfortable flirting between Norman and Julia, where
it was so uncomfortable.
She offers him a Valium at one point. Like, it's just coffee or a Valium. There's like two extreme differences.
Right, but which is kind of the point. Like, do you need the caffeine or do you need to knock yourself out? But the thing is, it felt very much like she was trying to seduce him and he was not having it. Mm-hmm. Like, I almost feel like she's like borderline like a succubus. Like, she is, because it's even in the way she interacts with Roman. Like, she's just very like grasping on and like using like being sexy to make guys do things for her. And these guys are all like,
I don't think I want that.
so like clearly if she is a succubus, she's bad at it. But it's very much that to me.
And because after that whole interaction, because we already talked about them finding the body and everything.
Yeah.
They have a little bit at school to show the god-awful acting of all the kids crying.
So bad.
About their
only yeah. Only note I have about that is that it showed the teacher and the students praying. So it was just another on my list of religious things. But that whole scene was so bad that that's the only note that I had was.
Yeah, it just made me really uncomfortable to sit there and watch these girls. Literally, this girl had her hands like this. And she's like, you can hear her audibly cry, like, I'm like.
Oh, but in that scene, Norman calls Letha on the phone and is like, I just want you to know with everything going on that I love you. And she's like, I love you too, Dad. And it's this vibe of he knows that something's up.
Yeah. And it's like
that something is not right.
And he says, like, I want you to know this now, especially now more than ever, that I love you no matter what.
Yeah.
And the one thing I didn't like about their back and forth, and I think it was just more on how the actress was like saying the lines versus I think what the actual scene was, but why does every child, like these children, have like uncomfortable sexual like tension with their parents? The way that she was saying, oh, I know, and I'm like,
yeah, I don't know if that was, like I said, because I don't know what's coming up, that could just be really bad acting, or it could be weird.
And that's why I'm like, I don't know if these, that's why I feel like there could be like a whole like pure bloodline type shit going on.
But if there was, why would Norman be so uncomfortable with Roman hanging out with Letha? Because he tells Julia to keep his daughter out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. There's just a lot of uncomfortable relationships. And there's also, it's a lot to learn in a first episode. Like an opening episode is a lot of character introduction, but at the same time, we've been introduced to so many characters and been told so much about them in such a short amount of time that I don't know if we can know anything yet.
So, and this is the thing that's coming. I don't know if there's anything else that we need to touch on. It's because after the school scene happens, it's when Roman goes back home, and the second most uncomfortable. No,
there's one quick clip before that of Peter going back home, talking to his mom. Yeah. And this is when I was like, no, it really was him, because I don't remember anything they said in that scene. The only thing that happened in that scene was that he was stamping out a wolf print in his yard so that it wasn't in the dirt anymore.
I don't know if it was his, though. I don't know if it was his print or if he knows enough of the area to know that there is someone there that does it, and he's covering their tracks for them. Because he was back at her later smoothing out the sand and shit.
Yeah. Like he was I'm very I mean, obviously we don't have to talk about this now, but I'm very convinced that it's him. Even if it's not him that killed her, he's the one who's a wolf.
Yeah. Oh, he's the one who's a wolf.
But that's what I'm saying, that print was definitely his that he was getting rid of.
Mm-hmm. And because then it goes to after their interaction, it goes to back to Roman's house. Yeah. And his mom asks if he knew her, and he said no. He never, like, they ran in different circles, and she was like shocked because he's like, if it has pom-poms, it's always in your rear view mirror, like, or your view or whatever she said. Yeah. He goes after cheerleaders, and then it gets uncomfortable, and she like puts her arm like almost like around him to stop him walking out of the kitchen. And he's very like, he acts like this is just like a normal interaction, but with the way she's talking to him, it's like she's trying to get him to sleep with her. And she's like, you can right? And I'm like,
He was like, yeah.
wait,
And there was almost like an air where it could have been just a very overprotective mom, or it could have been more. And it was almost like he was reacting as if that's just a normal way that moms are supposed to talk to you.
mm-hmm. No.
But then it cuts to us finding out that he blatantly lied to his mother, and he has a bunch of pictures of him with the dead girl, which we already kind of knew because we saw him talking to her in the beginning of this show.
He's a little wavy thing.
Then I don't know what.
Then they go to the cop. Nathan. I keep saying Nathan.
Norman and Tom, the sheriff.
They go to their business and talk to the doctor and ask him to look at the photos from the crime scene because they want to find out if it's an animal attack or someone on 2 feet.
Right. And he says scientifically there's no way it was anything that walks on only 2 legs. It was an animal, and they talk a lot about like why an animal would do it in this way and how and everything. And it's very clear that Norman does not want to be there and does not want to be talking to this guy. So despite the fact that they're still in business together, they like have issues. But also Tom clearly doesn't like him either. And so
they're both aware that he lies about what he like the things that he tells them may not 100% always be the truth.
Right. And the one line that Norman says that I think is important only because of the nature of this show. Like, I think if it was a regular drama and someone said this, it would just be a mean thing to say. But he says, I think if you stabbed him, blood wouldn't come out of his veins, which I think means something.
And another thing is that goes to show like their tension is that the doctor Price,
yeah, Price, but with a Y.
Price, yeah. Talks. I forgot the brother's name again too. My brain hurts. Help.
Norman.
Thank you again for the millionth time. So Price asks Norman, like, how's your family? And he's like, just because there's a cop here and because of what happened doesn't mean that I'm still going to tell you about my family. He's like, you don't need to know about it.
Yeah.
So clearly he doesn't want this person to know because this person might already know a little bit too much about his family for him to be asking that.
And then I'm blanking on what I know there's one scene that is just Julia sitting alone in her room, and she uses the same vial that Peter's mom has to put it in her eyes. There's no other context. There's just that moment.
Like, it looks like it like irritates her eye for a second, then she looks at herself in the mirror and like smirks. Yeah. And this is where I was talking about the number of the vials. Okay. Julia, hers was like almost empty. And like she was shaking like the last little bit of almost like a last vial into her eye. So I feel like this is something that's like, whether they are of the same nature or they are of the same, like these two families clearly are using the same things for certain reasons, but we don't know what they are.
Right.
And clearly, like they're rich, they might not have what they need to use in to protect maybe themselves, because it seems like Peter's family they had like 5 or 6 in there, and she had one with only a little bit left that she had to really shake out to get into her eye.
Right.
And she only put it in one eye and not both.
That was what was weird to me, was that she only put it in one eye. But also, if she birthed Shelly.
And I'm going to go back and probably watch it before I watch episode 2. I want to see what eye she puts it in, because if she puts it in the eye that it's the side of Shelly's face that's messed up, I wonder if she's trying to do some true sight type shit with Shelly.
I don't know, or maybe she just is has the same deformity but is hiding it.
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't. Is there anything else before the last scene?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, I don't think so either. So then it goes back to that same weird playground dollhouse and that the girl was killed in, and Peter is like running his fingers through the dirt.
And real quick before this, because this adds context to this last scene, they're holding a vigil that night for the girl that got murdered.
Yeah. So he's sitting there, and I don't know if he was trying to hide something or find something. It was very kind of frenetic. Like, it didn't make sense what he was doing. And then he looks up above him, and the paper lanterns from the vigil are all in the sky, and it looks exactly like his jellyfish in the sky dream. And then immediately Roman is there, and he says to him, "How did it feel to kill that girl?"
And then it cuts to black and the credits over. And, did you want to talk about like where you think the show is going and like where I think the show is going?
I want to do, well, first we've got our first end of episode segment. Who deserves a throat punch? Now, when we were talking before we started recording, you said you weren't sure if you could punch anybody after only knowing them for one episode. And I wonder if that has changed now more that you've talked about things.
I have a feeling that Julia and Hemingway might need to get slapped in the face, but Julia, I feel like a throat punch is coming her way soon.
Well, I decided that Julia was going to be the person I was going to punch basically 35 seconds after she came on screen. I was like, this girl is literally, my only note about her is that she's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
She's so gross. And
it sucks that I love the actress. It's
I love her, and I think she also plays bad very well. It's not about the actress; it's about the character for sure. But for me, also, there's this weird thing where today, in 2020, Bill Skarsgård is 29 years old. But when they filmed this show, which filming was probably in 2012, that would have made him 21, playing a 17-year-old. And I find it morally reprehensible to think of him as sexual, despite the fact that I now, as he is older, find it capable to do that. So the fact that this woman, who is clearly older than I am, also his mother, is throwing herself at him, makes me want to punch her in the throat.
Yeah.
I don't even care if she's some weird kind of demon who killed her husband. I want to punch her in the throat for preying on a child.
That's a very, 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 very good thing to want to punch someone in the throat about. Because that is not redeemable at all.
Right. No, like, here's the thing. When you watch a supernatural show, obviously there are good guys and bad guys. And sometimes you like the bad guys better. Hashtag Kylo Ren. Anyway, but even if and at this point, we don't know who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. They're kind of trying to get you to like Roman and Peter equally.
Mm-hmm.
Only Roman's really not a very nice person, so I don't know how that's gonna go. But they're
also,
well, that's true. But also, Peter's kind of more of like a charming asshole, whereas Roman is more of like a deep, mysterious, brooding, I don't really know if I can like you yet kind of thing. So not
the thing, guys like that get me every time.
See, but the snarky ones who say shit that they really shouldn't be saying, those are the ones who get me. Like, that's why I love Damon Eldator more than Stefan, because Stefan is broody and annoying, and Damon is cracking jokes that are inappropriate at all times.
And I like Damien too. Like, I honestly like both other characters really well. I just think Bill Skarsgård just really pretty. As soon as I saw a cigarette go into his mouth, I'm like, okay, I'm done for. Like, this is my new obsession. Skinny white boys with a nicotine addiction just apparently ruined my life. And I hate that. On to the next thing. What's another end of the segment? End of the show segment.
Our second segment is trivia, but unfortunately this episode has none, so moving on. And lastly, we have predictions.
Okay.
I very much am in the camp that Peter did it. I don't think Peter meant to do it, but I think he did it. I think Vince was also a werewolf, and that had more to do with his dying than alcohol. And my boldest prediction, that's where we were at. My boldest prediction is that somehow Roman and Peter are going to join the same team, and Julia is going to be the bad guy.
Broski. We're on that same wavelength.
Yeah. I don't think it's okay. Soon. I don't think it's going to be soon. I think there's going to be tension, but I think eventually it's hard to make you like two characters equally if one of them's not, like, if one of them is really truly the bad guy.
Yeah, like, it's like they wouldn't go through all this work to try and get you to stay on like a kind of like a same level with both of these characters if they weren't supposed to end up meeting in the middle at some point to fight a greater evil besides each other.
Right.
My theory is because of the fact that we see that Peter has dreams that represent things in life, even though they are altered, that happen in the future. I think with him being part gypsy, I think that he is able to predict things without knowing what they are until it comes to fruition. And that's why I feel like he didn't do it. And I feel like there is more between Roman and this cheerleader that we are led to believe. And I think Roman's going to want answers for it. And him and Peter, that's, I feel like, how their alliance could start to form, even with there still being tension. Right. Him being able to see predictions of things that are happening. He might get another weird dream. And then now if he sees it can represent something else in the real world. He might let Roman know. And that's how they might end up finding exactly what it is. And I have a feeling what killed, I feel like he is a wolf as well, but I don't think he wants the existence of wolves being known. And I think he had tracks from probably hunting something else at night, not killing a person. I think he was probably out hunting and he wanted to keep his tracks covered because they're so close to the crime scene. And I think that something that is in this lab that Dr. Price works at, and that's part of this whole thing, I feel like it has to do with something with botany and something with living animals, and I feel like human experimentation, because he was wearing big gloves, and they made it very evident that he had to wear these gloves and had to take them off to not cross-contaminate. So I think that what is a greater risk is that, like you said, and that's why I think Julia and Dr. Price and that whole business aspect of this world is going to be the bigger problem at hand that Peter and Roman are going to realize, and that's why they're going to come together to join forces.
Now, this is something I don't have a theory for. It's just a question based off your theory. If the jellyfish were the lanterns, what's the snake?
The snake, I feel like, will be something, because the reason what I know is the snake, like, it's basically the same thing, but it's like everything must come to an end, but that end starts a new beginning.
Yeah, but then, and I get that the Ouroboros, but then the snake jumping at him.
It could be.
I think he's gonna die.
We can't say that, because here's the thing. Julia is, if we're using modern terms, she's a snake. And if she hasn't died, her new beginning, and if she is what a Upier is, and even if he doesn't know that he is that, Julia can't have a balance of life and death, or beginning and ending, because she hasn't died. She has her soul hasn't left yet. It was brought back, and she's just been alive on that same trail, not going in a loop. And I feel like the snake jumping at Peter is because of the fact that their families don't get along. Julia will probably try to attack his family or his mother.
See, I pictured it more as if the snake is always eating its tail and the snake is coming at him, that is the tail, that is the end, and that's why I think he's going to die.
I mean, that's not a bad theory. I just don't want to think of Peter dying.
Yeah, I don't really want that to be the answer. I mean, I think so far he's my favorite character.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
I definitely love Peter's like snarkiness. I just want to see more of it, and feel like to have him in a comfortable setting so that he can like show it off a little bit more.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk a lot. The most interaction he got was with a few times with his mom, and with Hemingway, where they were talking that whole time. But other than that, he stayed really quiet everywhere else. And that's why I think Peter killed the girl, because it's way too in your face obvious that, because they've been so secretive and been so like keeping certain things in the dark with us, I don't think they would make that obvious. New kid comes into school, a day later a girl dies. I feel like would be too, I feel like it has to be something that's newer to the town, because he moved in that summer. She died like a day before school. So he would have been hunting or killing something this whole time.
But maybe it wasn't until he was comfortable.
That's also true. So, I don't think it's Peter. I don't think he's the one that killed him.
All right. That's okay. We'll find out who is correct.
Definitely not in the next episode. But the thing is that I feel like they make out of her death when clearly it's not that important, because they don't bring up the teacher. I felt like it might not have been something cool if the teacher, they called her, so it doesn't really fucking matter. So like the teacher had played a greater part in it. But
I don't care that the teacher doesn't play a greater part in it. The teacher is not important to me. I just don't know why they wasted all my time getting me invested in this affair that should not have been happening.
Mm-hmm.
For nothing.
I'm like, okay, cool, you call her Banksy. Ooh, I don't care, because you're dead now and she doesn't come back. So, cool. Thanks for wasting my time. Yeah. Literally, the first 5 minutes of that show, watching Bill Skarsgård get laid by a prostitute and a girl hit on her teacher and then die. Like, that's where our time went, and none of that led to anything. Unless, him cutting his finger and rubbing his blood on that chick did some shit.
See, but I doubt that I don't mind that, because it introduced us to the fact that he needs blood and is weird. I would rather not have had less than a minute of television before I saw nakedness, but I don't necessarily mind that scene. But the whole build-up with the girl, just for her to die, like, if you're gonna have her have this relationship with Roman that is causing him pain, show that. Don't show me her love affair with her teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But that's what we ended up with. Because now we're talking about Roman's feelings through Roman, and clearly he doesn't talk about those. So that's going to be very hard to do. And it's going to take a while for us to get there.
Yeah.
It's like a chore.
I don't know. Right now, the only thing I am truly curious about is Shelley.
Yeah.
What is she?
And that's the thing, is I feel like it's more than just vampires and werewolves. I feel like there's so.
That's the thing. That's the thing, is like, it's not just vampires and werewolves, because what the F is Shelley?
Yeah. You're probably gonna be some alien bitch. What was that? Ooh. like
I
ET phone
hope
home.
not. I hope not. Like, I don't mind sci-fi. I like sci-fi and I like supernatural, but when they get too intertwined, it gets messy, and I don't like that.
Speaking of messy, I want to talk about a thing that I noticed because of the film style when they went to when they pan up the business building and when they're inside of it. I noticed a very, very stark similarity to American Horror Story Hotel, which it wasn't out yet, but
Okay.
it reminded me of you probably haven't seen Hotel.
No.
So there's the camera angle and the way it in American Horror Story Hotel, the way it shows off the hotel building.
Yeah.
And very similar to show you that it's a daunting presence and a daunting force, and I feel like that's why they're using the angles they are.
See, it reminded me of Batman cartoons.
Well, the shape of the building, yes, literally.
Yeah, I was like, and like even the font of the name on the building at the angle that they shot it at, I was like, literally, that's like that's like the Wayne Tower and Batman cartoons. Like that is what it looked like to me.
And when they're like the white areas and like the way the angle of the camera is while they're walking down the white hallway, very similar to a scene in American Horror Story Hotel where because the Countess she's like a vampire, and she has like all these children in this secret part of the hotel, but that's a whole other thing to unpack. It just looked like one of those areas in there. Like I can see where they're picking up like film styles from other shows to use in it. And that one was just
maybe it was just also done because, like you said, Hotel wasn't out yet. So maybe someone who worked on this also then worked on Hotel.
I believe even it still had an American Horror Story film, especially in the chase scenes. Like I got Murder House vibes from that chase sequence with how like flashy and spotty and like unsettling it was. It felt like something out of it. And that was out at that point. I feel like there was just like when it comes to horror TV, you kind of not piggyback, but like you play off what other people are doing, and not in a stealing way, but in how it fits the mode of the TV show.
Right. I mean, because there's always, in any kind of storytelling, there's only so much you can do. First of all, the amount of time you have dictates things. And then there's also just the fact that, like, I think horror has a tendency to be a genre that gets reused a lot more than in other genres because horror plays off of fear. And in order to be universally fearful, there's certain things you have to go for. Like some people are terrified of spiders, but when people send me pictures of spiders, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so cute. Like there are certain instinctual fears that all people have, and good horror has to dig into that to be successful. Just like, and I think comedy has a tendency to be like, it's okay if you don't think this show's funny, somebody else will, and not all comedy shows resonate with everyone. Like personally, and I know that as a millennial, I shouldn't be allowed to say this, I don't find Friends that funny. But I know. I don't hate it, but I don't personally find it that funny. But it's still successful because somebody does. But with horror, it's more, it has to target more because it has to find that place where everybody's going to be afraid of it. And so I think that's why there's so much in the horror genre that gets borrowed and redone and reused. And it's not stealing so much as knowing what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. And like this is a movie that I think did a really good job at going on the outer extreme with using a horror trope to make a really jarring, horrifying movie. You probably haven't seen it because I think you would probably get scarred from it because like it scared me. It made me feel uncomfortable. Hereditary.
Yeah, no, I've heard a lot about it, and I don't think I will ever be able to watch it.
I'll explain the one scene for you. It's the one scene that like stayed in my head. It's like it's a very end of the movie. Like it's like the last like few scenes.
Hold on, before you explain this to me, please remember that it is midnight and I have to go to bed.
Do you want to end this and then we can explain the Hereditary to you afterwards, so you don't have to edit it out?
No. I want you to not tell me when I'm about to go to bed.
Oh.
Because sleeping is a thing I would like to do tonight.
Yeah, I'll explain it to you tomorrow morning if you want to call me later.
Great, perfect. I mean, I won't be able to call you because for more than like a little bit, because I'll be at work. But yeah, no, we can talk about this when the sun is in the sky. Not when it is raining and thundering and lightning at midnight and I have to wake up for work in the morning.
Yeah, no, that would not be it, sis.
No, not. So cool.
Cool.
All right. Now that someone has sat through this,
yeah.
You poor thing. I'm so sorry. I would try to promise that they'll be shorter in the future, but I don't think I can.
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna come down to like depending on what especially with this first episode, there's so much to unpack.
Right.
It's gonna depend on the show, how the episode went.
It's gonna depend on when I decide I'm done with this show emotionally. Because the first season it has a very low Rotten Tomatoes score, but critically it doesn't have awful reviews. The third season, on the other hand, the only review I could find said terrible. So I'm sure by the time we get to the end of season 3, I will no longer want to talk about the show for 2 hours.
Yeah, I'll be like, okay, this thing happened. I'm real mad I wasted 6 months of my time on this shit. But here you go, because you want to know.
Yeah.
It sucks.
So if for some reason you actually have any questions for us, or maybe you just want to tell us that we did a horrible job on this podcast and should really stop talking, you can email us at deathandaliens@gmail.com. Our YouTube channel is also Death and Aliens. You can find me on Twitter at MK Superstar, spelled EMKAY _superstar. That's also my Instagram name. Sometimes I'm cute.
And you guys can find me. I'm on like everything. I do have my own YouTube channel. Go check it out. It's just Monica Lynn. And my Instagram name is at monica.lynn_. And my Twitter is Moni _Lynn _. But Moni is spelled MONIE and _LYNN _. I tweet some funny things and I don't get appreciated over there, so make me feel validated. So
also follow her on TikTok because it's funny. Find her on TikTok.
Don't have me on. I have one TikTok that got popular only because I'm disgusting trash for 5 seconds of summer and I'm like scream crying a song in my mirror, and that got 2,600 likes. Like, why did that get blown up? But my music, please. No, you screaming into a mirror is what the people want, apparently. Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to cut all of that out.
Don't blame me.
All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll...
Yeah, we have to have like a cool outro name. Outro thing. Like I'll have a spooktacular day. Yes! That's what we're going to tell them. Have a spooktacular day.
Sure, fantastic. No, just kidding.
Okay.
You're right. All right.
Be creepy, stay weird. If you come back normal.
Stay weird. And please, God, just listen to this.
Yeah.